Hello and welcome to another special preview of the Reviewing Network Live, and for this particular preview, I wanted to talk about a story that had just broken in the past week. It involves my all-time favorite movie getting remade into a live-action film. Of course, I'm talking about the news that Bambi, the live-action remake, which has been first announced a couple of years ago, it's moving closer and closer to a reality because they just hired a director for it, and I'll get to her in just a second, but I've talked about my thoughts on this over on the website, over at the Reviewing Network website, but I'll kind of briefly run through that real quick of my thoughts on that. First of all, I shouldn't be really that surprised since we've been getting all these different live-action remakes of the Disney animated classics. It's become a hot commodity. It's become what Disney has been known for the last couple of years, and for the most part, most of them haven't been. It's been a smart move on their part. They've made money. Most of them have actually been pretty good. You've had a couple of exceptions where they've been just lackluster or just downright terrible. But what gets me worried about this Bambi remake when they first announced it was that the movie has such a lasting impact with me in so many ways. It's a classic movie with gorgeous animation and music that still holds up to this very day. It's got memorable characters to it. It shows that it's not afraid to step back and play down to its audience. And it asks questions about how life works. I mean, it's just a great, great movie. It's a much better film than what you would have thought of back then. It's got a lot of heart to it, a respect for its audience, and for me, remaking this movie has a lot of promise to it, honestly, but at the same time, I can see how Disney can easily screw this up so badly. And I do have my concerns with this getting remade. One of the big ones is that the runtime of this is one of the big factors for me. Like, the original Bambi ran for about 70 minutes long, basically an hour 10 minutes. They do get a lot of story and exposition out there to make you invested in what the characters are going for, what they're dealing with. So my worry is that they're going to expand this by adding pointless characters, pointless subplots that have no purpose to the real story. They might try to make Man a real character in this one, which has me definitely worried, and it's probably going to be like 2 hours or maybe 2.5 hours long, which, yeah, that stuff I'm definitely afraid of. I mean, sometimes it works. I mean, sometimes in, like, The Little Mermaid, it worked fine with some of the new additions they made in there, but it doesn't work like that on every level here. Like, what do I want to say here? It's just pointless. I mean, there's no reason to expand the story if that's what you're really planning on doing with it. But I digress. Another concern, like I mentioned before, adding pointless subplots and characters or changing characters around to represent a modern audience. There really isn't a whole lot of modernized changes you can make with Bambi. It's a timeless movie that takes place you can say that this takes place at any time in the history of mankind. It worries me that they're going to add elements and situations to modernize it for audiences because they feel obligated to do so. Case in point, what happened with Pinocchio, and let's add Chris Pine in there, and let's call him an influencer, and just like, get out of there with that. I mean, third concern, the CG effects. You know, they mentioned that it's going to be a live-action CG movie in the style of The Jungle Book and The Lion King, and Jungle Book had great CGI. Jungle Book made it work better than The Lion King did. I mean, obviously, The Lion King didn't work because the expressions on the characters was none whatsoever. I mean, you can't really do that with a movie like that. And The Lion King had emotionless animals for the majority of the film that rarely expressed any real emotion or their faces, or even in their performances. And you cannot let that happen again with Bambi. You can have photorealistic animals if you want to, but you can't just not give them emotions on their faces, and that was one of the biggest mistakes Lion King could have done. And fourth concern I have with it is, how do you tackle the heaviest emotional moments of the film, primarily Bambi's mother dying? Of course, that's the big thing that everyone remembers for it. I've gone on record to say that I think the way they presented the death in the original film is nicely done. I like how they didn't in that movie just come out and say, Bambi's mother is dead. It lets the audience take in the fact that something horrible has just happened, and you have Bambi constantly calling out his mother to not hear her answer back, and then the Great Prince comes out and says, your mother can't be with you anymore, and just Bambi, this slow reveal of what's just happened, like he realizes that his mother has died, it just takes it in with the snow covering majority of the screen and the single teardrop coming from his eye. That's one of the best single scenes of animation I've ever seen, and that's going to be something that cannot be screwed up in the live-action remake. You cannot do that, because that's the critical juncture of the movie where the emotions really start to come out. And if they screw that up, that's going to ruin the entire movie. I mean, that's what happened with The Lion King, too, when Mufasa dies, and you have Simba, the live-action Simba going, no, with this, again, emotionless face, and it's just like, that can't happen again. And again, don't cut to a much peppier and happier song like they did in the original Bambi. Like, that was one of the things I really didn't like about that's one of the few things I will have to say negative about Bambi. But the last thing I was going into this movie concerned about was who they were going to get to direct. Were they going to get somebody like Jon Favreau? And I mean, if Jon Favreau would have directed it, I really wouldn't have minded, because he's proven time and time again how good of a director he can really be. But I had some other suggestions. I had somebody like Travis Knight, who had just done Kubo and the Two Strings and Bumblebee. Chris Butler, who had done Missing Link, or David Lowery, who did Pete's Dragon. Hell, I was even throwing somebody like Mariel Heller, who did a great job representing Mr. Rogers with A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Those are people I would probably get to work on this. But I mean, if they had gotten somebody like Tim Burton, this thing was going to be dead on arrival, because you can't have Tim Burton do Bambi. Like Dumbo, I could see where they're going for with Tim Burton being involved in there, and it almost works, but not really on Dumbo. But it can't do that for Bambi. I mean, it can't be that way whatsoever. And so the news basically comes out that that Sarah Polley is in talks to direct the live-action Bambi. And Sarah Polley, if you don't know who she is, you've definitely seen her in the past. You've seen her in such films as the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead remake. She's also been involved with stuff like Stories We Tell, which was a documentary, Take This Waltz, and Away From Her. But most notably, recently, she won an Academy Award for writing the Best Adapted Screenplay for Women Talking, which I have seen since she won the Oscar, and I will say the movie itself is actually pretty good. I think it does work I think it does work a lot better than I think a lot of people would have given it credit for. It is a smartly written film, and you can definitely tell that she has evolved as a filmmaker. So, again, I'm not that shocked about them selecting her for this, because I think she will do a decent job directing it. As what I saw with Women Talking, I think she did a very good job working on that film as well. The film as being written, it's the same people that they announced when this thing was first announced, still involved. Genevieve Robertson Dewart, who did Captain Marvel and Tomb Raider, and Lindsay Beer from Chaos Walking are still set to write the script. The production company that gave us Pinocchio, the Robert Zemeckis one, which that has me concerned about it, but they're working on this film as well. There's no word yet on a filming date for this yet, so considering that we still have a writer's strike going on at the time of this posting, as well as an actor strike that could be happening in just a couple of weeks, it may be a while before this thing actually goes in front of the camera. I mean, who knows? Maybe they might try to do something behind the scenes with it, but that doesn't involve the actors or the writers involved in here. But I don't know how you can do that. But I digress. You know, when this news came out, I really thought I would have been more upset about it, because, of course, you're messing with one of my all-time favorite movie. This is my favorite movie of all time. I've talked about it before on the website. I never really delved into it on here per se, but this movie really is my all-time favorite movie. And to see them going to remake this, because they kind of feel obligated to do it, because they're going to do that with all the Disney classics at some point. I mean, for God's sakes, they just announced that the Moana live-action remake, which is coming less than 10 years after that movie came out, is going to be coming out in theaters in 2025. 9 years after that movie came out. So, yeah, they're going to do every single one of them at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to try to get a live-action Encanto or Frozen remake out in the next couple of years. Don't be surprised if that happens, by the way. So, yeah, it's not surprising that they're doing Bambi at some point, and I'm not gonna use this entire post to talk about my criticisms towards this idea. I personally wouldn't do it, but I know it's going to happen anyway. And so far, they've got a good director to work on it. That I've seen a film that she's done, and it's actually pretty good. But I'm just worried about the take they're going to do with it. I don't think she's going to be the problem with the film. It's how Disney is going to present this as a live-action movie. That's what has me concerned about this. So I'm still giving it the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to keep my expectations in check here. I'm going to hope for the best with this film. So, but that wasn't the main reason that I wanted to use this particular video to talk about that remake. But I wanted to use this to talk about why Bambi is my favorite movie of all time. Because, again, I haven't really talked about it on this particular on my YouTube channel. So I figured, why not do a video talking about that? So why is Bambi my favorite movie of all time? I mean, it's weird to say, yeah, because it is my favorite movie of all time. It's the best coming-of-age story I think I've ever seen, and it is the best animated movie I've ever seen. You basically follow this deer who's already been hailed as the Prince of the Forest at his birth. He's got these expectations built up for him so much that as he grows up, he makes friends with other animals in the forest. He has to learn the skills needed to survive, and even finds love is when he gets older. And then one day the hunters come, and Bambi must learn to be as brave as his father if he is to lead the other deers to safety. And, you know, for me personally, this is one of Disney's finest works they ever put out, and it's my favorite movie for a number of reasons. For one thing, this thing is over 80 years old, and it still looks amazing. When I watched this movie on Blu-ray for the first time 10 years ago, I forgot how gorgeous the scenery and the animation looks. And the Blu-ray version that came out the first time around does a spectacular job of catching that. And of course, since time has passed, we've been getting these 4K transfers of different movies, and I'm not sure if the one that's been on Disney Plus is a 4K transfer of it, but if it is, it looks just as good, if not better. I mean, the forest setting as the film opens up is amazing to look at. The scene near the end as the forest is engulfed in flames, that's a spectacle to my eyes. I mean, my favorite visuals come from the scene, you know, as the great Prince of the Forest walks up the hill after seeing Bambi for the first time, face to face. The music is playing in the background, and then running back down to let the other deer know that the man is in the forest. Those are great visuals. Those are my favorite visuals of the film. Everything about the film's visuals and animation is amazing to look at. And they did a terrific job making it look fantastic, and for it to still look as good as it does over almost 100 years later is still amazing to consider. There's very little dialogue in the film. Much of the film has no long scenes of dialogue, but like small bits of dialogue. I think the longest scene of dialogue I heard was about 2 minutes of talking, and that was during the Twitter-pated scene when we see Bambi, Flower, and Thumper as adults. And everything else is played through the music. I love the way the music tells the story here and how Disney decided to do that. There doesn't have to be a whole lot of dialogue to help the story move forward. Just let the music tell the story. And speaking of the music, this has one of the best scores for any movie ever. The songs that play throughout the movie are well put together. You know, Love Is a Song That Never Ends sets the tone for the movie very well. It's a really good song for the time. And the music, like I said, the score is beautifully done. It works incredibly for that opening scene where you're just seeing the forest setting in the background at the beginning of the film. I mean, it's beautifully well done. It's still one of my favorite scores I've ever listened to. You can relate to the characters. They're all very memorable characters, and we can all relate to them. Bambi is optimistic, shy, and very weary of the world around him. We've all been this character before, and when he finally grows up and is more known of the world around him and the threats that are out there, we've all acted this way too. You have to be able to figure out how to maneuver your way around through life with all these threats out there, and not just to protect you, but all the things around you. And I think the film does a very good job of capturing that. It's got a great 3-act story structure. It's a nice 3-act story structure that doesn't make it confusing for the audience to stick with. The first act basically tells you the story of Bambi, the young prince, being born, grown up, learn about the dangers of man, and learning to talk and walk. The second act, you basically have Bambi dealing with the unexpected death of his mother and growing into an adult deer, and then end up falling in love with the female deer in this Feline. And then the third and final act with Bambi and the help of his father, the great prince, trying to protect the forest animals and, of course, Feline from the evil man, and saving the animals from the burning forest, and seeing the circle of life happening all over again as you see the birth of 2 new deers at the end of the film, which that's a great structure. It doesn't get complicated or confusing at all, and you can easily just relate to it. You can just stick with it, and you never get really the sense that you have no idea what's going on. You never get bored by it. You're invested in what's going on throughout the course of that segment. So the structure, I mean. And like I said before, man, when Bambi's mother gets shot by man, it's a great scene. Like, I love that scene because it doesn't just come out and say that, yeah, Bambi's mother is dead. It lets the audience take it in. It makes you realize something horrible has just happened, and Bambi consistently is keep calling his mother to not let her answer, and to not hear her answer back. That's worrying him. And then you have the great prince come out and say, your mother can't be with you anymore. And then that bit of animation, like I said before, when Bambi realizes his mother died and takes it in with the snow covering a majority of the screen and a single teardrop coming from his eye. Like, the expressions too, like at first he's like in awe, and then all of a sudden as he's processing this news, you just see that slow realization that yeah, she's not coming back. Like, great animation throughout that entire sequence. Like, it really, that is so well done. I think that is such a very solid, and I think that's a very solid piece of filmmaking that they were able to do that and capture the emotions like that without having to spell it out for you. It just had to make you realize what just happened. Even as a kid, you have to realize what just happened. As a kid, of course you're going to cry about this because because losing your mother's a big deal. Losing any parent's a big deal. And yeah, like, the emotions make sense in this case. And as an adult, you still feel that effect. You still feel you still feel the way Bambi feels even after all these years. And sometimes you still will get a tear out of it. I still get a tear out of it sometimes. The one thing I don't like about that scene is that it immediately cuts straight to happy music and springtime has arrived. I mean, it really made me upset because it ruins what could have been a really, really perfect scene. But like, you have this big scene that just happened, and all of a sudden, with no time taken away, it's just back to the happy music again. Because, like, I mean, I'm sorry, it doesn't really hurt the film too much, but it's more of an annoyance, honestly. It gets on my nerves for about 30 seconds to a minute that they did it that way. And honestly, what I've found out recently is that, of course, they made a direct-to-video sequel of this, Bambi 2, which honestly I would say is probably one of their best movies, direct-to-video movies, I should say. And what I've noticed is that if you stop the movie right at the end of the scene where the Great Prince shows up and tells Bambi that his mother's dead, like, stop the movie, go to Bambi 2, play that movie out in full, and then come back to this, I think that actually works out very well. Like, I think it works a lot better than you would expect it to be, because Bambi 2 is not a long movie at all. I think it's about the same length as Bambi as well. So, I mean, that I think works a lot better than the way they make the transitions here. If that transition in the original film had been a lot better, like if time had passed a little bit more, like to let the audience seek in what just happened, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But like I said, if you want, like, put Bambi 2 on after that scene, and then start it again with the scene with the birds singing, you know, it's we get to springtime. And I think it actually works a lot better than I think a lot of people would give it credit for. So I don't know what else to say about this. Bambi is without a doubt my favorite movie of all time. It's because of the memorable characters, the great story, the beautiful animation, the wonderful music. It shows that it's not afraid to step back and play down to its audience. It actually wants to take chances. And it's not afraid to push the boundaries of what you could do for movies back then. It's a film that still has a whole lot of lasting longevity to it after all these years. And I mean, what else do I really need to say about this movie that hasn't already been said already in this? It's just a great movie overall. And I'll end this by kind of going into Bambi 2. Like I said, I thought about doing this for a long time, a couple years ago, and then I finally did it. And then you stop the movie after Bambi's mother dies, then turn it on to Bambi 2. I think what happens when Bambi's mother dies is around the 43-minute mark. Switch over to Bambi 2, and once that film finished, go back to the original Bambi. It surprisingly blends together so well. I think it does a very good job of transitioning you much better than what it does in the actual movie. And other than that, though, the Bambi 2 overall really is a great movie. It's a great direct-to-video film. The animation is just as gorgeous. It's surprisingly that this would have worked as a theatrical release too, even though I think they did release this in theaters in select areas across overseas, but I don't know where exactly. I think maybe London perhaps, but I know that this was in theaters in select areas around the world at some point. But it's a really good sequel. It surprisingly beat my expectations the first time I watched it. It feels like you never really left. Like, the animation still, it looks a little bit more advanced than the previous film, but it doesn't really look as different as it does in the original film. Like I said before, you could put this on in the middle of Bambi and it would seem kind of seamless for the most part. I mean, if you want a surprisingly great sequel to one of Disney's finest films, I think Bambi 2 still is the best Disney direct-to-video sequel that they've made. And honestly, I think you could go back to it and really get a whole lot of enjoyment factor out of it. So I'll kind of wrap this up, going back to where I started off here with I do still have my concerns about the live-action Bambi coming, but like I said before, I have a lot of trepidations towards it, but I'm not as upset as I would have been as I should be right now, because like I said, making a live-action remake based off of my favorite movie of all time and one of the greatest animated movies of all time, and there's a good chance that they're probably going to butcher it, but I'm not ready to be that upset about it. Like, I'm not really ready to be in full anger about this, because I knew this was going to happen. At the same time, they've got good people working on it, at least in terms of the director, so I'm willing to give it a full shot here, and I think that, I mean, like I said, I'm willing to give it a full shot here. I think if they let her do what made Woman Talking such a good film, and let her direct this film in a way that actually kind of works in the film's favor, it could actually be really good. If they don't do the same thing that they've done in other Disney live-action remakes, some notably bad live-action remakes like a Pinocchio or a Mulan or something like that, don't add in modern elements to it. Don't make it over almost 2.5 hours long, because the new elements you're going to add to it are not going to be that great. I can already tell that from what I've seen you guys do in the past. But sometimes that does work. But at the same time, I've seen what happens when they add too many subplots that are really pointless to the main story. And just don't talk down to kids. Like, that's the one thing that I really hate about these movies, is that they talk down to kids so much in these movies. They put in gross out jokes, pee jokes, poop jokes, and it's just like, these are supposed to be timeless stories that don't have to result themselves to gross out humor. I mean, this isn't the Shrek movies. I mean, this isn't those type of movies. Like in the Shrek films, you can get away with that, but not in a live-action remake of Disney's classic movies, where they didn't have to do that in movies back then. You shouldn't have to throw those in there in order to wake your kids up. Like, the movie should speak for itself, and that's really what I'm worried about here. But at the same time, like I said, I'm not really ready to just go all out rage rant on this one just yet. I mean, I need to see how the movie I need to see how they do this. I need to see that this movie actually is what they actually do here. If this movie ends up being really good, then I'll be really happy about it. If it ends up being bad, it's going to be really bad. It'll probably be up there with Pinocchio. And Pinocchio was directed by one of my favorite directors, Robert Zemeckis, and even he screwed that up. So yeah, bottom line, I have my trepidations about what they'll do with this live-action film, but at the same time, I'm more optimistic than one would think. So I'm willing to give it the benefit of a doubt, but I think people should go back and watch the original Bambi, and even Bambi 2, and see how great those movies are. Like, those movies still hold up after all these years. They're just so well done. They're great movies. And the original Bambi in particular is still my favorite movie of all time for a number of reasons. So with that said, let me know your thoughts down below on Bambi, Bambi 2, or just the news of the Bambi remake. Let me know your thoughts on them. How do you feel about the character as a whole? How do you feel about the movie as a whole? Do you think this live-action remake has a chance of succeeding or not? Let me know down below. And also, if you want to check out some of the other posts I've done here for this particular show, I'll put a playlist on the corner here and put the last post I did about the Jurassic Park 30th anniversary. So, go ahead and check those out if you want to. And with that said, I will see you guys next time for another video. So, until then, take care.